Okay, hello, welcome everybody to the Roxborough House Roundtables. My name is Evan Lane. I'm the faculty director of the All Inspector Center, and this is an ongoing series concerning topics which are of interest to faculty, administrators, and more important, of interest to students. Today, we have a student host, Alejandra Conejo, who's a senior in the Law and Society program. So hello, Alejandra, and take it away.
Hi, everybody. Today I felt like this discussion was pretty important just because of everything that's going on in the world right now. 2020 has been very crazy. And obviously the spotlight is on COVID. I'm currently a senior, so I'm in first amendment and like senior seminar. And we were going to do a roundtable, and I wanted it to be about COVID and the First Amendment, especially because I feel like there are so many like misconceptions about like the restrictions, like whether it violates like your First Amendment rights, like mask wearing, whether it's optional or not. A lot of people are kind of confused, or like they feel like they have certain rights. So kind of the purpose of the discussion was kind of like to clarify. And like I'll be going into like the technical stuff later. Like I'll be talking about the First Amendment, like exactly what it is, what it says, and like police power and everything like that. But first, I kind of just wanted to start off with like asking about you guys' personal experiences. Like for example, like I was an essential worker during the stay-at-home order, and that's actually how I ended up getting COVID because I worked at a store. And also, if you guys don't want to share like sensitive stuff like that, like that's fine. Like share whatever you're comfortable with. But yeah, like there was like a lot of issues like being in the store with like people not wanting to wear masks and feeling like they did not have to, and then they had the right to refuse to wear a mask. So I just kind of want to ask you guys, like, have you guys experienced anything like that first, just to see like where you guys are at with like this part of the topic?
Well, I guess I could start. I belong to a development has a pool, and over the summer I was responsible for my grandchildren. Only certain amount of people were allowed in the pool, so that was and they kept very good, but you had to go through the clubhouse first. And when I walked in, there was a guy at the desk where you have to sign in, and he was wearing a mask, but one of these guys, you know. So at that point, because I was with my grandchildren, I approached him from a distance. I had my mask on, as did my grandchildren. And I said to him, sir, would you mind please just put on your mask properly because my grandchildren are here? And he turned to me in a very defiant way, like he's ready to fight. And listen, if he wanted to fight, I had all the intention of letting him do it, okay? It would have felt damn good. But he goes, are you telling me how to wear a mask? And I said, I think I just did. So at this point, and this is the most amazing thing, he goes, well, I'm a doctor. So at that point I said, well, why am I telling you how to wear a mask? You should know. And he stormed off. So yeah, that was my experience this summer among many, but that's the one that stood out to me. Karen, do you have a similar situation?
I don't, but I was just thinking about the parallel with vaccines. You know, this is a health issue, and like schools, you know, ban children from attending if they don't take vaccines because it's a health issue. So obviously that's legal. So, you know, forcing mask wearing should be legal as well. Is the way I interpret it. So, it's a health issue.
Alejandra, as a first working as you were, how many times did you run into trouble?
I still run into trouble. Like this is why I feel like this topic is so important. Like in the beginning, it was much more prevalent just because like the mask wearing was newer. Like it was right when the stay-at-home order was like happening, and I work at Target, by the way. I don't care if anybody knows that, but so like, you know, like we do pretty good with like sanitizing like carts and stuff like that, and But like the issue is like people coming into the store without wearing masks, and then we're like, hey, like, can you wear a mask? Like, we will provide you with a mask, and like they still say no, even though they don't have to pay for a mask or anything like that. And they're like, oh, I don't have to wear a mask. It's my right not to wear a mask, and it still happens all the time. Customers, like, they don't respect like the 6 feet, like like distancing. Like they don't, like, they'll come straight up to you, ask you a question, pull their mask down to ask you a question. So that's just like my experience. I'm still experiencing it. I don't know if anybody else is still like going through stuff like that. Does anybody want to share?
I think the only experience I had, a negative experience, which actually wasn't too bad. I was in a store with my mom one time, and there was a lady without a mask on the phone. She's got her shopping cart. She's going around, and she happened to always be in the same aisle that we happened to be in. And my mom finally said to her, "Where's your mask?" And she genuinely was stunned that she didn't even realize that she didn't have it on. It's just, so, normal that we would be out and about before the pandemic without a mask. So I think, she did apologize, and she was looking in her bag to get hers out. But I suppose sometimes there is that instance where people do forget, like, oh, I forgot to get my mask. I always happen to have a spare one in my handbag and one in my car, but I guess it just happens because we're tuned that way. And this was months ago, so it was still kind of new into the pandemic. So that's the only experience I've had, kind of negative, so sort of.
Oh, well, I go out walking a lot, and actually I do see outside most people are not wearing masks. And the thing that bothers me about it is that I'm with my husband, and that's okay. We're wearing masks, and it's often on narrow trails, and you can't really distance yourself. So even though it's outside, it's not great to be running or walking and near, it's airborne. So people don't seem to think it's necessary outside. And my husband and I tend to move away, and virtually nobody makes a move to move away. On an Arab, we do, nobody else does. I'd say almost maybe 1%. So that's disappointing.
Hi, I'll talk from my experience. My husband, he works 5 days a week for the federal government, and he wears a mask all day long because he's high risk, because he has a medical condition. The people he works with do not wear masks. They'll come close to him. People know he has a medical condition. He has asked, like, he has said stuff before, and they'll be like, "Oh, what do you want me to wear? A ventilator? We're all gonna get it." And like, I mean, him wearing a mask only protects him so much. If everybody wore a mask, it would, be basically nothing now. But he has the same thing when he goes shopping, and there's people, like, he goes down an aisle and there's a guy pull his mask is all the way down. I have a 14-month-old daughter, so I don't go out that much, and like, we can't even go for walks in our neighborhood because nobody wears masks, and they don't, like, we can try to cross over, but then there's more people, and they just walk right by you and they say hi to you, and they want to see the baby, and I'm like, oh no. So we did it one time and we're like, not again. So that's my experience. It really infuriates me that when people say, "Oh, well, it's not a law, I don't have to do it." Well, you should just do it to help other people. And I have an uncle that is big, like, "Oh, it's against my rights to wear a mask," and he went to all these like rallies, and luckily he didn't catch anything, but he's a big person that it violates his rights. So that's why I came to listen to this, because I was interested in hearing more about it. Just hearing more about whether it does or doesn't, or how it's interpreted.
Yeah, I'll get into the technical stuff, but yeah, I have noticed, even like just personally, a lot of people tend to get very angry when you tell them to put a mask on. It's something that I experience a lot at my job. Like, you don't have to tell me what to do, you don't have to boss me, blah blah blah. But just like the gist of it, like, it technically doesn't violate your First Amendment rights at all, actually, especially when it has to do with the greater good for society. But I guess now, like, I'll get into like that type of stuff just to like go over what the First Amendment is, because a lot of people, if you ask them, they'll like be like, oh, it's my freedom of speech. But it's kind of like a bulk of like like a couple of things. So like just like to read it out as it is. It says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So like for this instance particularly, I wanted to focus on the word Congress. It just says Congress, but we have kind of evolved into kind of just having like associating that with like government entities. And then also kind of what's most prevalent with like COVID and like the restrictions going on is like the prohibiting of like free exercise of religion, you know, like not allowing, you know, gatherings and stuff like that. Also like freedom of speech, like expression. A lot of people claim that like having to wear a mask kind of gets in the way of their freedom of speech and expression. Also, and then also the right to like assemble again with like outdoor gatherings, indoor gatherings, the restrictions with like, even now as we see, like, you know, we can't go, you know, like for like the holidays and stuff like that, like travel ban, like the travel ban, like, you know, the restrictions to travel and stuff like that. But that's kind of what I wanted to focus on with like having to do with the First Amendment and stuff like that. And just to like go over it more, the First Amendment, it doesn't only protect like verbal words, it does protect expression, like it protects like symbolic speech, you know, political signs, like flyers, clothing, like the right to remain silent, all of those things. But it only protects your speech from government censorship or punishment, which kind of applies to federal, state, and local actors, so like lawmakers, elected officials, public schools and universities, courts, and police officers. But, and it also, like I said, it doesn't include protection from private citizens, businesses, and organizations. So like places like Target and like restaurants and stuff like that, you don't have freedom of speech in those places because they are private entities, and they kind of have the freedom to kind of, I don't even know the word I'm looking for.
Place restrictions.
Yeah, to like put restrictions in place. It's kind of completely up to them because they are private entities. And then also a lot of people are like, okay, well, technically the government is, you know, restricting like my speech and stuff like that, or like getting in the way of my freedom of expression because, you know, like it's enforced, that's what we're looking for. It's enforced by like, you know, the government, like the mayor, everything like that, you know, the stay-at-home order and everything. But technically the government has the authority to kind of use police power, which is like possessed by like state governments. And kind of just like broadly, this was like granted in the 10th Amendment, and it allows states to establish and enforce laws that protect the welfare and safety of the public, through which governments regulate individual rights to protect the interests of society as a whole. So like obviously COVID is affecting like our society as a whole. It's killing a lot of people. And because of this, the government does have the right to enforce those restrictions. So technically, nobody's First Amendment rights are getting violated. But
Hajar, just because I see all these people that come into different places like Target and say, your restriction, like your stores, a lot of them say you can't come in unless you have a mask, okay? And you'll be thrown out if you do, if you take it off. And they're yelling, and they call them Karens, they're yelling all over the place saying, it is my right, you're infringing on my rights. And I just want to make this very clear. Do you have a First Amendment right in Target?
No, you don't.
Okay.
You do not.
Why not? Just let's make that very clear to all the Karens out there.
Yeah, because Target is considered a private entity. It's not owned by the government or anything like that. They are private. So Target has the right to enforce restrictions as they please. And they have the right to throw you out of the store if you don't follow like their restrictions. It's right at the front of the store. The sign says you have to wear a mask when you come inside. And if you don't have a mask, we will give you a mask. And if you don't want the mask that we're going to give you for free, you have to leave the store. And then security will escort you out, which has happened so many times at my store. But yeah, somebody has a question?
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt. Should I ask it now?
Yeah,
Hi, my name is Brett. I missed the beginning. I don't know if anybody gave introductions or what was the very beginning discussed. I'm an MBA student at Jefferson. I live in New Jersey side. I'm an online MBA. And somebody mentioned that it's not illegal, but I was told in New Jersey that it is a law and you can be fined for not wearing a mask. So, do you know? I thought by state it varies, and if you have any information about that.
Lane, you live in.
Yeah, Governor Murphy is in the middle of putting more restrictions down. I don't believe he's done a mandatory mask order yet, but I think it's probably around the corner. But it's within his rights to do that because of what Alejandra just said. The 10th Amendment gives the government the authority, and the Supreme Court has also stated that the Constitution does not guarantee an absolute right in each person at all times and in all circumstances to be totally free. If the government believes there is a state interest, which is significant, those rights can be overwritten. So your right to freedom of expression, even if there is one in mask wearing, and I'm sure Alejandro will get to that in a minute, that can be trumped, to use a word I don't like to use much, by the need of society. And that's in the Constitution. They do have emergency police powers. So he has those powers, but it can't be discriminatory. So you can't say that only men could wear it, and women can't wear it, or Black people, white people. It can't be discriminatory. It has to be neutral, not content-based.
Yeah,
so go ahead.
I'm sorry. Thank you for that. And this is only through third party. My uncle's a lawyer, and he mentioned that you can be fined for not wearing a mask. I don't know the terms. If it's in, I'm assuming it's in a private company or something like along those lines. But in New Jersey, I believe
private companies can do whatever they want, on their grounds. They're not government entities. Yeah. Constitution doesn't apply to private entities. But
let's be careful, though, Evan. It is a business that opens up to the general public, so they don't get a carte blanche to do whatever. Think about like civil rights. So let's just be. I know I agree with the First Amendment stuff, but let's not give a sense that private companies can just do whatever they want to do.
Oh, no.
There are considerations that since they open their doors to the public, there can be modicums of restrictions on what they can do to their customers.
Right.
And how they treat them.
Right. You can't kill people inside. That's for certain.
No, but you can't do discrimination even if you're a private company or things like that. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Right. Discrimination, including non-mask wearing.
Well, that's a question that might have to be addressed as to whether that and that's the thing. It's not a First Amendment thing. It could be a civil rights thing, but that would have to be litigated somehow, some way. Somebody's got to be willing to take it on that basis and run it through the courts.
Peter has a question.
So just like hypothetically, if a company wanted to not mandate masks in their store, does the government have the authority to force them to have a mask mandate in their private location or whatever?
The government has the ability to make the law apply to everyone and everywhere. They can do that. The law applies, just because you're in Target doesn't mean that criminal laws don't apply and other laws don't apply. The law applies across. If there's a mandate, that will apply everywhere in the state. There could be a federal mandate, which we don't have, and that would apply the whole country. Or there can be a state mandate, which applies only to that state if there's no federal mandate.
The federal mandate might be trickier, though, because it's going to end up being kind of fought on the grounds of the traditional, whether the regulation of the entire economy is within the scope of the federal government, which has always been an issue, constitutionally. Yeah.
Karen?
I have a question about that. My husband, he works, like I said, the federal government, but he's housed in Philadelphia. Would their organization have to follow Philadelphia and PA regulations, even though it's a federal building? Or does there have to be a federal mandate for them to have to follow?
You're in PA, New Jersey, whatever, controls what happens inside its state. It's not like the only thing that they couldn't control is maybe foreign embassies, which are not subject to their control. But other than that, no. What happens in PA is in PA, and that's the way it works.
Okay, that's what I thought. I was just curious like it's a federal building, so I didn't know if that had any like difference.
And I'm sure there's departmental rules that even if with the legalities of it, you wouldn't need a national mask mandate. The government could just impose it as a rule for its buildings that it can operate that way, and it wouldn't translate beyond that.
Sure. All right, Alejandra, go ahead.
I think Karen had a question.
Yeah, isn't this the same as like seatbelt laws, jaywalking, traffic violations? I mean, it's all for the safety of the public. So I don't, they're not considered civil rights violations to impose it. And people did protest seatbelts in the beginning, but I don't know if it's national or state, but seatbelts are required now, and it's to protect the public. So I don't see how mask wearing is different from that.
Well,
Vaccination.
remember with seatbelts, they came more into place because there was pressure put on the industry. And then when it became standard in the industry, they were provided. So then the next step was to get people to wear them. And the federal government tried to tie it through transportation funding, like they did with the double nickel, if you remember that, the 55 mile an hour, but also with other things. They do try to push it that way, but that's not through the authority of Congress. It's using their purse strings in this funding arena. So it's a little bit different there. And states can pick. We know in Pennsylvania, you don't have to wear a helmet on a motorcycle, so it does come down to enforcement. Yeah.
Go ahead, Alejandra.
So yeah, just like kind of how I think Karen was saying, like, like the seatbelt stuff, you can get a ticket for not wearing a seatbelt. Just like I think now I'm pretty sure you can also get fined for like having if you get caught like having like gatherings that are larger than like a certain number of people and stuff like that. So like they are getting more stricter with that type of stuff. But again, like we said, they have police power and they're allowed to enforce those type of things just to keep the general public safe. It's like the pandemic is much more important than the rights of people. People think they're like getting violated because a lot of people are like trying to say that the restrictions also violate like symbolic political expression. A lot of people are feeling like not like mask wearing is kind of like a view, I guess you could say, like either you're a mask wearer or you're not, but that's also just, it's not the case, regardless of like people's like motivation to wear a mask or not wear a mask. Like you just have to wear a mask, and it's not an infringement on anybody's rights.
And following up on that, just recently, the Minnesota court, Minnesota Voters Alliance versus Waltz, came up with a decision. And what they said is for the First Amendment rights to apply, it has to be symbolic, expressive speech. And what they said is not wearing a mask is not inherently a message because it does not, it basically says that we don't know what it means. An observer would have no idea why someone is not wearing a face covering. That's what the court said. It could be that, I think Melissa said earlier, her friend in the store, she just wasn't wearing because she forgot. It could be any reason why you're not wearing it, or you're an asthmatic, or you have problems with your lungs, whatever. So the court said that it's not protected speech, it's not expressive.
Brett, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I don't want to get too off topic if it's not more of a comment, but I feel like it's a little difficult with the fact that it's changing so much. The First Amendment hasn't changed ever, but the COVID rules and policies have. So, one day they tell you you can wear blue, and then the next day you say you can't wear blue anymore. And next day they change it all together. You can't wear shirts at all. So it's like hard to figure out what the rules are. And I know they don't know. They don't have the answers. But I just got a text. A friend was supposed to visit me from PA, and the DOH said that if they leave now after Friday at midnight, they have to get a COVID test negative to come back to PA within 72 hours. So is number one, no one's going to know if he came to visit me if he didn't really say anything. But if he did, I mean, what are they doing? Like, just what's going on? I mean, my daycare requires my kids to take temperatures and stuff like that. So what if I said you're not allowed to take a temperature of my child? It's just so many things that I guess I have to be a lawyer to figure out. But I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of have a question about that too, because what if like you're traveling? So is it now required like the 72 hours like
He
before?
just texted me on the DOA. He took a screenshot. If you go to COVID-19 information for travelers, the DOH says about PA, and they're required to have a negative COVID test within 72 hours, unless you're leaving the state for medical treatments. So then they don't. I mean, I'm just reading what it says, but I could just say I'm going for medical treatment, I guess, and nobody will ask me why I left. But
I think just addressing it, Brett, we're getting a little cross field because it
Yeah.
does deal with the First Amendment, but you bring up a really good issue because it's a inherent problem you have with the federalism system. Because we have 50 different states, and then we have the federal government overseeing it, and we don't have a coherent national policy. And I'm not going to throw blame around, but we don't. So what we're doing is we're riffing from state to state to state, and every state is having different directions and different ideas, which leads to a terrible situation. Like you're saying, we don't know what's going on, and that's very, very difficult for us. And hopefully that will change in the near future. We have a coherent national policy that we all follow. One of the biggest problems at the beginning was instead of cooperating on PPE across the states, all the states were competing against each other, which drove up the price and led to a supply chain nightmare. So you're seeing a very difficult situation because of a lack of central leadership. But that's not a First Amendment issue. That is just a completely political nightmare that's going on that's leaving us all going, what? But that's getting far afield. But I want to address what you had to say because it's very valid. I'm going back to Alejandro.
Yeah, I was just kind of going off of that. I was going to bring up kind of something recent that happened between two senators, what Lane was telling me to bring up. But recently what happened was that two senators were kind of talking about something. They were inside of like the building and everything like that, and they had like other like representatives there as well. And one senator was upset because he was speaking and he was wearing a mask, and then another senator, the senator he was speaking to, was not wearing a mask. And he was like, hey, like, I'm just gonna ask you, like, can you please wear a mask? Like, you know, you have to wear a mask. And the other senator was like, well, there's like, people are super far from me. But regardless of that, like, people were beneath him as well. And, you know, like, the other senator's concern was that, you know, like, he was risking other people's health. And he was just very adamant about, like, not wanting to wear a mask. Kind of like what I was going to go into was, what are the effects of like politicians and like leaders not like refusing to wear masks and like not following guidelines, especially with like, you know, how we see with like Trump's rallies and stuff like that, kind of sending that message to people. What kind of effects do you guys see from those examples?
I would say big effects. I mean, I think that's become why mask wearing has become, or not mask wearing has become, a political issue, which it just should be a health issue. But from the top and from one political party, it's been made out to be a political issue. So there we are.
And with spiking beyond back to the March levels at this point. That's where we're at. I wanted, because we're running out of time a little bit, I want to discuss assembly, because you were talking a little bit about the beginning. We talked about freedom of speech, but how is assembly? Can they stop religious gatherings and, you know, churches, synagogues, mosques? Is that within their power as well?
Just going off of like the police power rule, I believe that it would apply to all aspects of the First Amendment, just because they have the discretion of, you know, enforcing things to benefit the public. And I think they're more concerned with people's safety than they are people's right to, you know, speak freely, and also, you know, religious assemblies like as well, just because like I said, they already put restrictions on, you know, like just regular gatherings. So, you know, they kind of just, I feel like they have to have like a blanket rule of just, you know, nobody can gather. It's more not to discriminate against a certain like group of people, like because of their religion or anything like that. It's just more people's safety comes before everything else. And I think that's like the purpose of the police power and their right to enforce those things. You know?
The problem became in some states where they said it's okay to hold open liquor stores and gyms, but you can't have people go to church. And that was looked at as in some lawsuits as discriminatory, that you can't, either you're shutting things down or you're not shutting things down. You know, you can't pick and choose. So the problem becomes is blanket rules are allowed. But when you start discriminating, you're allowed, but you're not allowed, it becomes a problem. I see, Henry, you wanted to say something?
Well, I mean, look, and especially in regards to health stuff, we've always had an accommodation that we've allowed a religious exception, and that's what makes this really complicated. Even with like vaccinations, we provided, because there was nothing constitutional as to why those. It was just an accommodation understood through the Constitution of why we have it. But there's never been that direct connection made, and I think that's what makes this a problem, especially for those who can use it as a justified means to attack the mandate altogether.
I do point back, goes back to 1944. That's how old the law has been. It's Prince versus Massachusetts, and it says the right to practice religion freely does not include liberty to expose the community to communicable diseases or subject other to health problems. So that's what the law has said. But as Henry pointed out, despite what the law says, accommodations have been made along the way.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Like you even see it, it kind of even like blends into things like the abortion debate, which is that there's always this exception, life of the mother is always like that last bastion. And we've always kind of done it that way. And then in these circumstances, when we think, no, it should be everybody, then people point to that and go, we've done it before, we can do it here. It's tough.
Peter, you had a question?
Well, I mean, I was just gonna say, like, this might, it seems a little too simplistic, but like, can't you just say, like, if you're gonna maybe shut down religious gatherings because of COVID, can't you say you're not really shutting it down, you're just changing it because, like, you could call a Zoom meeting like an assembly?
And that has been actually a response in court, saying that as long as they have the ability to hold it virtually, then you're not depriving people of their opportunity to worship. So yeah, you're dead on.
And I mean, you could talk about it from the longer legal terminology. The right to assemble is more about being able to join with others who have a similar mindset in various ways. That, because remember, a lot of where it comes in the history of Anglo-American law is a sense that entire religious groups were banned. Like the Catholics were not allowed to meet. Because Catholicism was deemed a bad thought. So part of what the idea of assembly is that because the whole First Amendment is wrapped up is you're always allowed to have what's up here. No government can change that. It's more about various ways of feeling comfortable that others can share that, and there's a way for you to communicate between them. That's why speech and press are right above it. In the construction of the amendment.
So Alejandro, final thoughts. We're going past 35 minutes already. So
just final thoughts. Yeah, part of me always kind of sympathizes with like everybody's concerns with like the restrictions and everything like that. Obviously, like this is something that we're not used to, and like we're all trying to adapt. And then also, I think part of the blame is just the lack of organization and everything like that, like rapid response. But I think just a thing that everybody like needs to keep in mind, just like society as a whole, is that like it's not an issue with, like people don't want to infringe upon people's like First Amendment rights. There's more of a concern with like this is a virus and it spreads through people being close to one another and like everything like that. So like it's not like it's just more focused on that portion of it. I feel like if that wasn't the case, like these kind of misconceptions and like concerns like wouldn't really be like a huge thing. But because of the fact that the virus spreads so easily and it's very deadly, like, we've lost a lot of people to the virus, is the reason why like the government is choosing to kind of put the health and like the safety of people over things that are other things that are important to us, like our First Amendment rights, like our freedom to express our thoughts and like assemble and everything like that. And like we all have to kind of just make sacrifices. And that's kind of what's happening right now. But that's kind of all I had to say.
And I'd just like to make just 2 quick points going on. These people who won't wear masks always talk about their liberties. How about my liberties not to get sick? How about my liberties not to have my children and my relatives to get sick? How does their liberty not to wear a mask, which is at worst uncomfortable, and I wear it, it's not that bad. How does that measure with my being on a ventilator? I really don't understand how that measures up. But on the other side, I must say one thing. We always have to be careful because we're giving the government a lot of power here. And when we do that, they can always abuse it later when it isn't this type of awful situation we have. And so even though we're giving the government a lot of power in this terrible situation, and now we have to remain extremely vigilant that we don't do that again unless it's this type of emergency. So that's the final thought that I want to make. Anyone else would like to make a final remark before they go? Beth?
Yeah, I just have a nagging question I think about a lot, and maybe you can answer it. When could it ever become criminal? Like if someone knows they may have the virus and aren't wearing a mask, could it ever be a criminal thing?
There are right now laws on the books that if you have HIV and you
Right, like that.
knowingly or recklessly give it to another, that's an assault and battery. So yeah,
Wow.
the answer is yes.
But I will say on the note, especially echoing what or continuing on what you said, we tried a mask mandate during the 1918 flu with mixed results as we're seeing now. And we gave the governments the ability to do that. And one could argue that between now and then, it wasn't like they used that as the backbone of, installing other mandates along the way. So restraint has been demonstrated, I think, in the 100 years in between those two things. I'm not saying, look, nothing's a guarantee, but I think that's something to think about.
Anybody else? All right. Alejandra, thank you so much for a really interesting, entertaining, informative discussion. And thank you all for coming. And I will be posting this online, so share it with everyone and educate the world. Take care, folks.
Oh, real quick, Brett was telling me how their Zoom is allowing for like a limited time for users on Thanksgiving, I think. So be safe, do that, talk to your family instead of, traveling and having a big Thanksgiving dinner. But yeah, I hope you guys all enjoy your little break, and if you have a break, and yeah, just stay safe and wear a mask, please. Thank you.
Wear a mask.
Will do.